Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 46 of the Giant Zone. Kind of feel like we got a little bonus show going because we're in the playoffs here and we're still playing football. But hey, I'll take it, man. It's all good, and I'm sure everybody out there is happy as well. Tonight, of course, you've got myself, Fly Guy Carl, and my brother and co-host, Steve the Banker.
Go Giants.
And we are joined tonight by our good friend of the show from Tommy Takes, Big Tommy. Tommy, how are you, my brother?
What's up, fellas? Always happy to be on with Giants Zone. Even happier for this amazing Giants run that we're blessed to see. And I feel like at this point I'm like the unofficial third member of Giants Zone here. I've been on enough episodes here. I feel like that.
Well, you're always welcome. We love having you. It's the collaboration here between our shows is great, and
Absolutely.
we look forward to doing much more of it going forward here.
Likewise.
Before we get into this, folks, and chop it up, I'm just going to ask, please, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and tell your friends, and please have them subscribe as well if they're Giant fans. And/or if you'd like to download our show, please give us a 5-star rating once you download the show as well. Both the subscriptions and the 5-star ratings just help us to bring you more content week after week and keep this going forward. Again, we do this for you because we enjoy interacting with all of you, and we enjoy the Giants just like the rest of you. So we appreciate your support and look forward to more of it going forward. Now, with that out of the way, so we're at a really, really great time here, guys. And I would say, look, Tommy, I'm going to give you kudos here because you did come on here earlier this year, had 10 wins in playoffs, and I've been waiting to get you back on the show just to kind of give you your props for that. So, good on you and nice job predicting that. But I would say the majority of us did not expect this to be in the playoffs and now into the second round of the playoffs. So, it's great. I feel like we're playing them with house money, but man, I want to enjoy this ride for as long as we possibly can, guys, because it's been a great ride, and I don't want it to end just yet. So, given that, let's kind of talk quickly about how we got to this point. So we had the wild card game against the Vikings last Sunday. Great game. I didn't sit down the entire game, and I think I had to get new sneakers because I wore out the soles of my sneakers pacing all game. But it feels good to be playoff nervous again, guys, and I think you guys will both agree with that. So real quickly here, some of the highlights that I took from last week's game. On offense, you've got to start with Daniel Jones. 24 35 passing, 301 yards, 2 touchdowns, 17 carries for 78 yards. And it took a lot of hits, but he kept getting up. He still takes too many hits. He's got to stop diving head first. He kills me when he does that. So, but overall, he was a weapon. And he made good decisions. What I thought on some of the plays that he dropped back that maybe weren't designed to be runs, he knew when to tuck the ball away and run. And that's maturity. That's knowing the system. That's proving what he can do. And hey, folks, for you out there that don't like him, he's coming back next year.
Absolutely.
So you all better get used to it now. He's going to be our quarterback for the next few years, so you better get used to it. And no turnovers. Huge. Saquon, five receptions, 56 yards. He was a weapon in the passing game. 9 carries, 53 yards, and 2 touchdowns rushing. And both of his touchdowns were impressive in their own right. The first one, I think, was a 24-yard run around the end. He gets in speed and he just hits a different gear, and he's got moves. You've got to believe the defenders hate seeing him in space. And then his second touchdown, the 2-yard run, you could just see he wanted that. The comment, and he ran right through Dalvin Tomlinson, who's a much bigger man, to get that, which I know he was jacked up. It took about 10 minutes for everybody to peel me off the ceiling as well. So, I was impressed with that. Very quickly also, Isaiah Hodgins, 8 receptions, 105 yards, touchdown. Clearly Daniel Jones, number 1 receiver. And boy, just came onto the roster in November, and what an impact he's made. So again, Steve, as we talked about, Joe Shane, if he's not the GM of the year, I don't know who is.
Yeah.
And kudos to Kenny Galladay. Didn't catch anything, but man, did he have a block and a half that's on Saquon Barkley. And everybody in his defense has come out and said he is just he's come to practice, kept his mouth shut, and just worked. He's been a true professional. Then the only negative, with Darius Slayton with that big drop on 3rd and 15 minutes left in the game. Look, I don't want to jump on him too hard because he's really been better this year. And I'm sure there was nobody harder on Darius Slayton than he was on himself. But that was a terrible drop. But, hey, the guy's human. So overall, very impressive performance. I thought Kafka called a great game. I think he kept the Vikings off balance, both with Saquon in the passing game and Daniel Jones in the running game. The execution was great. Really no complaints offensive. I liked Daboll being aggressive, going on what, 4th and 1 twice.
Yep.
Rewarded for each time he did it. You could just see how this team responds to him. And again, Steve, we've said it too. Coach of the year. We won the offseason with Shane and Daboll.
Yeah.
So those are my takes on the offense. Sorry, Tommy, didn't mean to use your word there. Steve, what do you have as far as the Giants last week offensively?
So offensively, I had 4 specific thoughts. One, just coaching. I thought the Giants outcoached the Vikings. Their game plan on offense was so impressive. And what it made me realize, and I've heard 1 or 2 other podcasts talk about this, so it's not my own original idea, but it's something that I've after the last couple of days, I thought about it. The first half of the season, even into the first 2/3 of the season, this to a fault, this offense went through Saquon. And I think what we've seen is the evolution of the coaching staff trusting Daniel. So now the offense runs through Daniel. And that's huge because defenses stack the box, they blitz the run lanes. And I think that's why we saw our offense stalling so much, because it wasn't just the receivers, it was Daniel wasn't the first option. If he was involved, it was more him running. So I think there's a lot that goes into that. I think it's him trusting the wide receivers. Isaiah, for example, joining the roster November 2nd, but that's been cultivated on the fly. And to me, that's you got to give the players credit, but it's coaching. And then the coaching staff keeping this team level-headed. I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. And it goes without saying in football, in many sports, you often see the team reflecting the temperament of a coach or coaches and the coaching staff. And I think that's what we're seeing from this team now. They've limited mistakes. They don't get too high. They don't get too low. Daboll talks about that all the time. But it's manifested during the course of the game to the point that now we're actually physically seeing that as we're watching the team. And we're seeing it in Daniel and how level-headed he seems and confident he seems to be playing. So specifically just Kafka, you said it, the game plan, coaching, crossing patterns, taking advantage of that Viking secondary. So happy. Number 2, Daniel playing with amazing confidence and his decision-making. I'm so happy to see where he's progressed. And this was clearly probably his best game he's ever played. And hopefully just continues this weekend. We'll see. 3rd, offensive play calling. Opening up now that the O-line was playing more consistently. That was something I specifically took away. Amongst all of the clutter of all these great things we saw with the plays and the play calling and Daniel and Saquon and the wide receivers, I thought, that offensive line really seems to be coming together. They have 2 great pass rushers. Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter are maybe not top 10 in the NFL, but they're both established. They've had great careers, and they bring it. And for Andrew Thomas, we know what to expect. But Evan Neal, listen, that offensive line, and we're starting to see our interior offensive line pulling, which we hadn't really seen that much of. It was kind of a rarity, and you saw that on Saquon's one of his runs that got sprung. Right. So consistency of the offensive line playing together and being able to be relied upon. And then lastly, Daboll and Saquon taking Darius Slayton aside after that drop. You mentioned the drop, and that sucked. Because I think as Giants fans, we all just want him to continue his success. It's just been such a great story. And let's face it, if he had caught that would have ended. But Dable and Saquon taking him aside after that play, I think was in some ways even more important because on TV as you're watching it, that's showing you how they've come together and how the mentality of this team, the what Dable does with his staff, and then what Saquon is as a leader. Um, Clearly, they told him they need him. It was just so impressive. And lastly, I love Daniel. So some of my super quick takeaways on that fourth point: Daniel moving out of the pocket, moving the pocket. I love his quick throws. I love Saquon in the flat. I love the pre-snap motion. They're getting back to some more of that. Again, they had gotten away from it a little bit towards the end of the season, and taking advantage of what the defense gives them. So I'm not very statistics heavy on my takeaways from the game, but on offense, those were things that still, 4 or 5 days after the game, I'm still thinking about. Like, wow, these are all things that hopefully, regardless of how great Philly's defense, and I know we'll get into that, I think carry us over, and its fans can give us confidence that they'll show up and show well this weekend. So
One thing about Daniel Jones, did you notice how accurate his passing was Sunday?
yeah, phenomenal.
I mean, just he just you could just see the maturity and the confidence and the poise. And you can't tell me a lot of that's not coaching. I mean, he was amazing. Look, it's one game, it's a big game, but there's still more to go. But boy, you got to be feeling so much better about that.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. So, I expect to see hopefully continued, play at that level. Tommy, what do you have as far as the Giants on offense Sunday?
Yeah, you guys both said some great stuff. I'm gonna try to stay away from some of the things you said, try to come with something different, but I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Daniel Jones first and foremost. I mean, what an outstanding performance. You want to talk about putting it all out on the line, his first career playoff game. You could really make an argument his last 4 games played, probably the best 4 of his career outside of maybe a couple of the Washington games his rookie year. Just a phenomenal performance, seeing the growth of a quarterback. One of the knocks I always had on Daniel was in the pocket. It was always fumbling, bumbling, stumbling, strip sacks, ball getting stripped out. Now, not only is that gone, I mean, he's climbing the pocket. He's resetting the pocket, right?
Yes.
He knows when to scramble, when not to scramble. He's not scrambling into sacks, right? I do agree with Carl, though, with the hits. This kid has taken some devastating hits over the last 3-4 weeks. He's big. He's tough. Mike Mayock talked about it today. He's like, I remember seeing Daniel Jones at the Senior Bowl, and he was like a twig. He's like, I was in Minnesota Sunday, and it was like a completely different guy. His body was just shaped different. So I did want to give credit to Daniel. Phenomenal performance, making the most out of the situation. I won't take anything away from him, but I do think it's mostly coaching. I think they coach to his strengths. I think they give him what he needs, right, at the right time. And I think that's what the season was about. Slowly but surely force feeding him until they were comfortable, until he was comfortable, and the coaching staff and him comfortable with the receiving core. Because let's be honest, you had Marcus Johnson out there dropping passes sometimes. You didn't know who was going to be in there a lot of times. So I think it was a trust factor. And now what you're starting to see is trust among the whole offense. So just wanted to touch on Daniel. And next, Dexter Lawrence. I mean, just a powerful performance. On the last drive of the game for Minnesota, I counted 8 plays they ran. He had pressure on 4 plays, including the last play of the game, which was a meek 2-yard gain, right? And if looking at that play, you had Osborne open on a post. There was no time. Dexter Lawrence was right up the gut. He has just been phenomenal. I don't know if the Giants are here without Dexter Lawrence right now, to be honest.
No.
And
No.
I really don't, because he's just been – I mean, I seen a stat that said it was pressures from a 0 technique defensive tackle for the season. Dexter Lawrence had 29 pressures. The next 0 tech defensive tackle had 8. That's how dominant Dexter Lawrence has been. So I wanted to shout him out real quick. And I think it was you, Carl, that said it to 4th downs. Listen, no guts, no glory, right? This team is a fighting team. Look what happened in that game. Vikings take the ball, get the ball, Giants defer. Vikings come right down the field and score. What do the Giants do? Take the ball right back and score, right? Giants get another touchdown. It's 14-7. Giants put together that tremendous 20-play drive. Unfortunately, only ends in 3 points because of the motion penalty. Vikings score. All of a sudden, 17-14 at the half. Giants get the ball, start the second half. What do? Right down the field and score, right? Vikings tie the game 24-24. A little panic setting in. Giants offense takes it right down the field and scores again. this is a different offense, fellas, than we seen week 11, week 12, where, you know, like Steve said, it was all Saquon, and, you know, maybe DJ will get a couple passes here and there, a couple of medium passes, nothing deep. This is a different offense, and they're powerful. They're balanced now, and it's going to be interesting to see versus a much better defense in Philly how that balance works. Do they stay balanced? Do they try to continue to keep passing and utilize that? Do they try to go back to the old way of giving Saquon 25, 30 carries? That's going to be interesting. And lastly, Justin Jefferson. You know, he goes out in the first drive, has 3-4 catches. You're like, oh boy, here we go again. He's going to light it up. And nope, Adoree Jackson locked him down. He didn't do nothing for the rest of the game. So those would be my keys. Overall, very good game, very well-coached game. And this is a different Giants team.
Yeah, very quickly, Tommy, you kind of went into the defense a little bit, which is where I wanted to go as well. You know, that opening drive, Justin Jefferson had 4 catches for 31 yards. The rest of the game, he literally had 3 catches for 16 yards. He wound up 7 for 47.
Amazing.
You know, you take away one of their biggest offensive weapons there, okay? They held Kirk Cousins under 300 yards, 273 passing yards.
Which is impressive for him. He's consistently over.
Especially home, too, you know,
Absolutely.
in that stadium. TJ Hawkinson was a beast.
Oh, my gosh.
10 for 129, and it seemed like every time he caught the ball, there was no one within 10 yards of him.
I never want to see him again. I never want to play that guy again, I'll be honest with you.
But
unbelievable.
But at the end of the game, when we needed someone to put a stop on him, McKinney stepped up and stopped him. So he did his damage, but when we needed to make a play, you know, McKinney stepped up, they made a play. So and you know who I thought very quietly flew under the radar defensively for us was Darnay Holmes. Because Minnesota likes to throw the ball to Dalvin Cook coming out of the backfield a lot. And Darnay Holmes took him out of the game. You didn't see that much. You didn't hear about it much. So I was very impressed. Now, Darnay Holmes has a reputation, and he did it against Sunday a couple times. But all of a sudden, he flakes out and he makes a bad play. But overall, I thought he was very consistent Sunday. And, you know, and again, I think a lot of that is coaching too. So, you know, and again, to coaching, this team was ready to play. Steve, what did I say last week? I expected them to come out the way they did against Washington, ready to play, like almost as if they knew they were going to win this game. And again, a lot of that is coaching, but I think at this point in the season now, you've got to say a lot of that is the players too. It's confidence. Hey, we can do this. So I think the coaches push the buttons, but I think the players have bought in, and now they're to the point where they're believing it. So, you know, again, there was a time at one point where it felt like, when it was 24-24, Minnesota had the ball and they're driving. And I remember saying, you know what? They're going to score. We're going to have to play from behind. After all this, and then, you know, forgot exactly the sequence, but the defense held. Defense came up. I thought the roughing the passer call on Dexter Lawrence was horrible.
That was the worst roughing the passer I've ever seen.
And, you know, I was at the Tampa game Monday night, and there was another one on Dak Prescott. It was these referees, they're too quick to protect the quarterback. And I understand, okay, it's a passing game. People like to see points scored, but I mean, come on, guys. They're wearing pants. So, Steve, what do you have defensively?
Both of you guys have said this at different points, that this is not the same Giants team offensively and also defensively. And I think that's where, when we start talking about Philly, I'm so nervous, but at the same time hopeful, because on defense, this is not the same team. The importance of having Adoree and Xavier McKinney back cannot be understated. But I was very worried when Azeez left, and I'm so grateful that he'll be okay. Everybody's playing hurt. Is he hurt? Yes, he's hurt. But by all accounts, I saw the interview with him in the locker room yesterday. He's going to play. He's fine. And, you know, my concern is when he's not out, he's our best pass rusher by far. I know, like Thibodeau can't rush the passer like Azeez. Thibodeau does other stuff, and he's an animal, and he's more athletic, and he's a true outside linebacker with glimpses of LT, the way he pursues the running back, and he does amazing things. He's disruptive. but he's not a pure pass. Aziz is by far our best pure pass
Easily.
rusher. So we need him. We need him. And what happened? Did we have any sacks? No,
Mm-hmm.
not a single sack. So big picture, obviously we won the game. Thank goodness. Our defense did what they had to do at the end, but quite frankly, I thought it was a very milquetoast performance by our defense. And they weren't disruptive. I was waiting for the turnover, the interception. I have a knack. If you guys ever watch on Twitter, it's not uncommon. I'll be like, I've done it like 3 times all season, and it's worked out each time. And I almost did it, and I'm glad I didn't because I would have been wrong. I was like, we need an interception the very next play. I don't know. I buy a lottery ticket.
They almost had one, Steve. They dropped was it Julian Love that couldn't corral the interception?
Oh,
Yes.
It was Love,
yeah.
right? He caught it and then he just
Yes.
kind of dropped
Yeah.
it when he got to the ground.
But for our defense, I thought it was very milquetoast. It was good, and it was bend don't break. It was almost more like a Patrick Graham than a Wink, with hardly any blitzing, and they played some man against. Listen, that's an incredible offense. So, and Hawkinson had way more production, but are we surprised? Tight end is always our Achilles heel. So, listen, Tommy, I can't wait in a few months. Not now. It's the playoffs, but we'll talk about the draft. We'll talk about the need for linebacker, but I'm telling you, one of my hot takes the last 2 shows, Carl, have you heard me allude to it? Tommy, I've put it out there just so you know. So I look forward to talking to this down the road. Don't be surprised if it's the old Giants NASCAR where Justin Tuck was drafted, Matthias Kiwanuka, and we're like, why are they drafting these? We already have Strahan, we have OC, I wouldn't be surprised if they draft another pure pass rusher in the first 3, 4, 5 rounds. Wink is expert at developing them. Anyway, I'm getting off topic, but the point is, Aziz can't stay healthy. Thibodeau is amazing. He's developing in just a rookie. We need a little more. We need a little more of a
I
pass
agree.
rush. So, and I'm very, very, very disappointed that we weren't able to see a healthy Ellerson Smith be developed this year. They've done so much with Gettleman's old picks. That was a guy that I was excited about. So anyway, importance of having a Dorian Xavier back cannot be understated. 3 more quickies. Flott. Well, I know you had some concerns with him. I didn't blame you coming out of the draft. I get it. But he was on the national championship team. He played multiple spots in the secondary for LSU. He wasn't a corner. He played multiple. He played the slot. He played true corner, the boundary. He has experience, but you're right. He's too wiry. So we've talked about he needs to put on some weight. Listen, he's a rookie. Corner is perhaps the hardest position to transition to the NFL aside from tight end. You come in and it's like
And he's young too. He's like, what is he, like
yeah.
21?
He again. So what I love about this coaching staff and what I loved about that game was you saw Flott, you saw Belton. They trusted the rookies, and then they didn't trust them throughout the end of the season. Now we're starting to see them come back, right, guys? We're starting to see them come back, and we're starting to see them make some key plays. They're not playing a ton, but when you see them, Carl, we had your boy Belton out there. He's had a key play. So they're developing these guys, which also goes back to the genius of not playing the starters against Philly, right? A few weeks ago, more playing time for okay. So my takeaways: Flott again, a huge play, great technique. We've heard about that too, about our secondary coach. Wink saying he's the best secondary coach he's ever seen. Teaching these guys proper technique. Andrew Thomas, no pressures allowed again, Pro Bowl. Excuse me, all pro as far as I'm concerned. Not sure why Wink played so much zone, but I'm happy when they switched McKinney over Hawkinson. That I was happy about towards the end of the game. 2 other quick things defensively. Well, this one isn't really defense, but specials didn't hurt us, and I was worried about that. Guys, thank goodness, but I'm going to hold my breath again next week. We'll get to Philly. Thank goodness. I know we were all concerned about with our specials.
Right.
Leo played like a madman in that first half. Oh my God. The second half, not so much. That first half, wow. Dex obviously played great, and he played great the whole game. He was insane. Roughing passer call, you talked about it. Lastly, my final point. I don't know what else to do other than scream at the TV. I'm still so frustrated that Thibodeau's is getting held, and not just held, but we saw it. And if anybody saw some of the video and the screenshots people posted on Twitter, he was ripped and tackled on 2 occasions. No calls from the ref. And I realize he's a rookie, but this is no longer his rookie season. When you're in the playoffs, you're almost in your second season.
Right.
It's enough already.
Right.
And I don't know if it's because of his personality. I don't know what it is, because maybe they're on the road, but that's got to stop. They got to give the kid at least one of these. That was one of my takeaways. I'm glad we won. You don't cry. It's enough for it. But when I look back, I'm like, man, when is this kid? I mean, he's been outrageous at times, and he just doesn't get the calls.
He gets mugged. It's not even holding. He gets mugged at the line of scrimmage.
Even Mekhi Parsons came out and said it. Mekhi Parsons from the Cowboys was like, "That's ridiculous. This guy's wrestling him to the ground." So that's bad when your divisional opponent is coming out and saying this is crazy.
But I will say this. I will say this. What I do like about it, he's getting held. He's frustrated, but he's not pulling a Nick Bosa, slamming his helmet and taking penalties and putting the team in worse shape.
That's a good point.
So
he's too smart for that,
and probably been coached up about not doing it. So, I my hats off to him for keeping it under control.
Absolutely.
So all right, so that's defense. Tommy, did you have anything else you wanted to add about the defense last week?
Just to touch on what Steve said. As far as the zone, it became apparent early that they weren't going to give anything up over the top. The Giants. Wink was gonna, what's the saying? Death by 1,000 paper cuts, and that's a very tricky philosophy to have because it didn't really work in the first Minnesota matchup. Right? They end up winning the game. They drive down the field, get the 60-yard field goal, but I see the reasoning behind it. The reason it worked a little better this time, very little better, is they had McKinney and Adoree, and it made a difference. McKinney had they tried to get the deep post to Jefferson. McKinney almost intercepted it. As you alluded to play to Hawkinson to end the game. But that's a scary proposition to play all zone like that. I look for a little bit more man against Philly, especially with Adoree and McKinney back, because you could nickel and dime to death. You don't know if your offense is going to score 31 points against this team Saturday night. So that was my takeaway. I understand why they did it. I look for a little bit of an adjustment.
But the flip side to that, Tom, and I agree with both of you. I can't tell you how many times I put an explicitive and I cursed before I said zone Sunday afternoon. But I will say that's if for Wink to stay in the zone as long as he did, all right, seeing that we were getting chewed up again goes to the belief that he's got the confidence in his players to adjust and make the plays when they need to make the plays. And that permeates. So, you know what? With this coaching staff right now, I'm done second guessing them. They've made believers out of me. If they feel that they've got the personnel to do what they're calling, and I'm going to believe them. But the other half of that is we've seen that both Wink and Kafka, if they felt they needed to, they made adjustments. So Wink must have saw something to say, we're good. We're going to stick to the game plan. And
Tommy, do you think?
I'm
sorry, call it
quickly. The big key to that, McKinney and Adoree, as you said, Tommy. Go ahead, Steve.
So building on what you just said, Carl, Tommy, do you think that they played zone for so long because I am of the opinion that running back is a top 5 running back in the NFL. I know we held him to like 60 yards in that first game or whatever it was. But are you once Aziz went out, especially, not that he's so great with the run, but are you thinking maybe because of our linebacking core, they can play the Tony Jeffersons of the world and some of the, he likes to, are you thinking maybe he played zone to make sure that there was enough help if for whatever reason
underneath
that running game started getting picked up and they wanted to have like backups, so to speak, at the second level to make sure that, because you play man and the receivers and the tight end go out, those guys are stretched out. That running back gets through that first line of defense, he's gone. So you think it's to help the running game at times? That's why he was playing zone? I'm just curious.
I think something you said in there, you hit it right on the head. The Giants love to run cover 6. They love having their DBs out there. Not to be negative or beat the team on the defense. I think this is one of the poorer linebacking cores I've ever seen the Giants have, honestly. Obviously, they've strengthened it throughout the season, and this is a big thing for me. This and it's like the national media and everyone forgets now. This Giants team has been decimated by injuries. Nobody brings it up anymore, right? Because they got 10 wins, everything's great, but they have a GM that's plugged the holes properly throughout the year. He's done it at linebacker, still a poor linebacking team. I think Wink trusts the DBs more. That's why you see cover six. That's why you see dime. It's why you see nickel. Obviously, they trust Landon in coverage, but you hit it right on the head. I think they trust the DBs not only just to cover better, to come up and play on the run. Like Carl said, look at Darnay Holmes. He was a beast. I mean, he stopped a couple of screens, tackle for loss on a run play. I think Wink, you hit on the head. He's more comfortable with the defensive backs than more linebackers on the field.
So maybe this is a good segue, Carl, and I'll hand it back to you to get into Philly. But the one thing, Tommy, let's not get into a whole thing because I want Carl to lead us on this conversation with Philadelphia. But if you had to guess, and there's so much more to the conversation, we'll get into it. Because of what you just said, would you assume there's going to be a lot more zone again against Philly with those receivers, with Dallas Goedert, or Boston Scott, and their good running back core? What do you think we're going to see, man? What do you think we should be prepared to see? Again, not a full discussion yet, Carl. I want you to lead it.
That's a
but
good question.
In terms of the defensive scheme, would you predict zone or man? What do you think we're going to see? And I'm not saying I remember what we did in the other two games. I'm trying to remember.
Can I answer that? Can I throw my 2 cents in on that?
Absolutely.
I think you're going to see them start with zone. All right. Minnesota had Justin Jefferson. And then there's everybody else. Okay. Thielen, who's getting older. All right. Hawkinson. We are who we are with tight ends. The Eagles have Brown. The Eagles have Devontae Smith. The Eagles have Dallas Goedert. The Eagles have running backs that can catch the ball. I think we are going to start, and so let's start the conversation, because one of my segues, Steve, to your point, and good job on you, was, well, what type of offense does Philadelphia run? So Philadelphia runs the RPO, okay, the run play option offense, which the benefit, as I know it, to that offense is it gives the quarterback a chance to see the defense better. Okay. You run it out of the shotgun. When a quarterback in the run pass option hands off, he doesn't have to turn to hand off. He just takes the ball as he's looking at the defense, and he can hand the ball off because the running back just comes and takes it right in the gut. All right. There's also a play where the quarterback can move the pocket and the lineman away from the ball, the defensive lineman away from the ball, then chases downfield. So the quarterback at that point can pull the ball back and run an option, or or do a quarterback run around the other end if he's being over pursued. So the Philadelphia offense is designed for the defense to overcommit. Okay. And I think one way to counteract that, Steve, to your point, is if you're playing in a zone, instead of playing man to man and people are moving around because who's doing what, you've got your assignments, you got your zones. Here, you're supposed to go here, you're supposed to go there. So now you've got it falls on the defensive line and your linebackers then. And again, our linebackers may be in a little bit of zone too, but this is going to be a good game for Thibodeau and hopefully, Ojulari to maybe do something, or at least contain that outside, this week, that's my biggest concern, is Philadelphia getting around the ends on us and then having nothing but real estate in front of them. So that's why, Steve, to answer your question, I think they're going to at least start with the zone. You saw against Minnesota, they came out of it, in certain situations. I expect to see something very similar. I don't expect them to go from one and then to the other if they feel they need to, but I think they may pull out of it, given situations or different points of the game. Tommy, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. What makes Philly so tough to defend is, first of all, They rushed for almost 260 yards versus us in week 14, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then they have a man beater in AJ Brown who could take you over the top, jump balls. Then you have Devonta Smith who just eats up zone defense. I mean, the guy has like a magnet to find holes in the zone defense. So I think you're right, Carl. I think you're going to see a little bit more balance this game. I think Philly's going to try to run us out of the building with the running game, similar to week 14. Yeah, they're going to take their shots, but they're going to try to get Miles Sanders going. I don't know if they're going to try to get Hurts out there rushing. I think he's still banged up. To me, he didn't look, the same when we played in week 18. Didn't look like the same quarterback, whether he was holding back, whether they advised him to hold back. Didn't look like the same guy, 4 weeks earlier. But I think you see a little more balance. I think you see a heavy dose of blitzing. I don't think that's going to change. They're going to want to get him off his pivot. They're going to want to get him on the move. But it's very key to make sure you hold that contained, because Jalen Hurts is a quarterback that when he goes through his progressions and 1, 2, 3 are not there, he's taking off, and he's going to usually take off the edge. He did it versus the Giants in week 14. He is dangerous, man. You're going to have to get pressure. The good thing and the big key here is that no quarterback, if you ask any quarterback, do you want pressure up the middle or do you want pressure off the edges? They say, give me the pressure off the edges because I could step up. He's not going to be able to do that with Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence had a very quiet game in that week 14 matchup. It was probably, I'm not going to say his worst game because I wouldn't categorize it like that, but he had, I think, 1 tackle, 1 pressure, and that was it. I expect him to step up big time Saturday night. And if he does, that's going to hold big for this Giants defense.
And let's not forget Leonard Williams either. It's a two-headed monster. They both occupy a lot of space in that defensive line. So
absolutely,
Leonard's
a beast.
Yeah, if the two of them can contain the middle of the field. And Steve, I'm going to kick it to you in a minute. Who I expect to play an important role in this is based part of the same conversation Saturday night, is Landon Collins and Jalen Smith. If they have good games and they're containing and they're supporting, I think we're going to do very well. I think this is going to be a close game going into the fourth quarter because our defense is going to contain well. Steve, what do you have?
It's interesting. I've gone through a whole series of, well, there's A, but then A equals B. But then if it's B, well, then B equals C. And what do I mean by that?
That's what the Eagles will do to you.
Yeah.
The Eagles are dangerous. Yeah.
Right. I started out and I said, well, what's the secret in defense that the Giants showed in 2007 and 2011 against Brady? And granted, he wasn't a mobile quarterback, but everybody else is kind of, I think that changed a lot of the NFL. Is if the old adage, which has only been around as far as I'm concerned since those years, because before that, I think defenses were a little bit different, was if you can rush 4, man, you don't need to blitz. It allows you to get creative with your linebackers and your secondary and do all sorts of other stuff. So I said to myself, well, if we have Aziz, he's the most critical piece. Now we have healthy, and listen, Leonard's never going to be healthy until he has his offseason procedure, he said, but this time, like he's getting back. Because he was hurt pretty bad a number of weeks ago, right? So if we can get our 4 guys up front to finally be productive at the same time and playing, well, now we don't need to blitz. But it's the best offensive line in football and a mobile quarterback.
Yes.
So I think that's the key. Is I think Aziz, if he doesn't over pursue too much, because we've seen both of Aziz when he plays. Yes. And what Thibodeau is so good at is with my eyes, and you don't hear people talk about this a lot, but I've been thinking Thibodeau was getting baited a little bit in the beginning of the year. He got hurt, but then even when he came back, and now we're starting to see that he's not your typical rookie. That's why he was picked so high in the draft. He has this instinct, and he talked about it yesterday in his presser in the locker room. He understands how to read the offense, and he watches so much tape, but he instinctively knows when to pursue and when not to pursue. And we've seen him make crazy. So I don't know if we're going to blitz much or not. I would like to think our front 4 can get pressure by themselves, and I think they will at times. But I think, to your point, Carl, Philly's going to say, screw you, we're going to run the hell out of the ball in the beginning and blah, blah, blah. So I think and Thibodeau said it. He said it in his presser yesterday. It's about discipline. The key, Carl, you touched upon this as well, and Tommy, I heard you say it, is with our secondary. But to me, the leap that Adoree took last year under the old staff, and then this year is like I personally feel he's one of the top 10 lockdown corners. He doesn't get the respect because he doesn't get the interceptions. I think that's just always going to be an issue with him. But where he has been so impressive is his willingness now, since he came from Tennessee, to support the run. How many times in the last 2 years have you seen a healthy Adoree Jackson come up and stop a running back? You've seen it from Darnay a little bit, based in Pinnock. If Pinnock, they say Pinnock should be okay this
Right.
weekend, hopefully.
Right.
Our secondary will come up and support the run, even though they're playing, even when they're playing man-to-man, they'll blitz and they've gotten very good under Wink at diagnosing the play and say, you know what, it's a pitch, it's a sweep. So I think this is going to be all hands on deck more than any game we've ever played. And I don't know if it's going to be a ton of zone. I think there'll be some man. I think you have to because you have the luxury of having Adoree there. But having Adoree and then the safeties we have, Pinnock, Tony Jefferson, of course, Xavier, of course, Julian Love, those guys will support the run. It's all going to be about. I'm concerned if Philadelphia gets too much trickery with their offense, things that haven't shown on tape, getting our defense moving in ways that they're not expecting, and then hitting us deep because maybe our secondary came up to support the run. And I think you saw that against Minnesota. Remember, there was that play where they pitched it.
Yes.
And it went back, and it's like, what the hell are they doing? I think that's what they were doing. I think they've seen a lot on tape how our secondary will come up and support the run. And they were like, well, if we can suck them in, then we're going to hit them deep. And they didn't fall for it.
Right. Right. So, wow.
I think it's going to be a big game of chess, is my point, guys.
Can I touch on that too? Can I touch on that quick?
Go
That's
ahead,
a great
Tommy.
point. That's a great point, Steve. And also, our DBs do have a tendency to bite. If you remember in that Minnesota game, I think it was 4th and 2. I can't remember the exact down and distance. Adoree's covering Jefferson. It's like a 3-4 yard pass. And instead of staying with his man, McKinney leaves Hawkinson wide open to go for the interception on a guy that's already defended. Remember that play? That was like 4th down. That was a big blown one. So that's a good point. The secondary does like to be aggressive.
The issue I have, which you said, Steve, is what does Philadelphia have in the playbook that we haven't seen? And I don't know.
Sirianni's good.
And I don't know how to prepare for that other than, hey, guys, you got to just tell them, do not.
Carl, you know how you prepare? There's going to be stuff that Sirianni dials up that we've never seen.
Right.
But I heard the interview this week with Kelsey, their center, and they asked him what it's going to be like going against Dexter, and he's worried. And he also made a comment about Wink, and he goes, you know what also worries me? Unsolicited, he said, I'm worried about Wink because we already know there's going to be stuff we've never seen on tape. And he goes, it's my job with the quarterback to make sure I make the right calls. Listen, he's the best center in football for a reason. The guy, there's nothing he hasn't seen, you would think. Wink, this game will be Wink led. If he can, I mean, man, we're going to lean.
I agree.
I'm pretty excited thinking about it.
That's why I say I think that this is going to be a close game. That fourth quarter. This is going to be a competitive. This is going to be a brawl. That's what I'm expecting.
Guys are getting me hyped up here, man. I'm ready for Saturday night already.
Guys,
let's go.
We have the best coaching staff in the NFL.
Yes, we do.
I'm not saying we have the best head coach. I'm not saying we have the best defensive coordinator. I'm not saying we have the best offensive. But you cannot tell me, and I've said this before, Carl, you've heard me say this, there is no staff where the big three, because there's so many coaches involved. Right. You cannot. I'm sorry. I don't care, Kansas City, this one, blah, blah, blah. There is no coaching staff where all three match up against our three. That is our advantage. That's the advantage this week.
But collectively, it's the best staff. To your point, I think that's what you're trying to say. And one thing, I want to go back to Thibodeau for a minute. One thing, Steve, that you were touching on it, that he's more than just a rookie. Here's what I've noticed about Thibodeau, which really has me excited about what we have here. And I still believe he's going to be a future defensive captain of this team. Early on, when he would rush, he took a straight line directly to the quarterback. Okay? If he beat the guy, great. If not, you didn't see him. You've seen in recent weeks, they must have been working with him because now it's more of an outside-in approach, which I like that, especially against a team like the Eagles, because there's your outside containment. Now, I'm not saying they're going to sucker him in and then pop something outside. And then that's where your other linebackers or your DBs are going to have to come up and support. But again, I like the adjustment that he's made or that they have made in his rush, because you're getting a little bit more of that outside containment out of his approach now. And I think that's going to play a big part in this game. A big part in this game.
This is not the same defense that they've seen because it's deeper. And you might even see a Cordell Flott match up against AJ Brown occasionally because he's taller, lankier, and he's super athletic. He's not as fast as Adoree. He's not as instinctive and experienced, but we now have a Dane Belton, your boy Dane Belton. We now have a Cordell Flott that occasionally, Tommy, you said it, Devontae Smith, that's the guy I'm most worried about, actually.
Yes.
Well, now we have some additional guys in the secondary that they have some confidence in. You know, like they've weaned them in, they've played them, they've pulled them back, they've played that, they've been burned, they've learned. And now we saw against Minnesota, like you can rely upon these guys in small doses. I think that's huge against this team. Philadelphia hasn't seen this defense from us yet.
And what a stroke of genius by the defensive coaches to play these guys against the Eagles 2 weeks ago. Go ahead, Tommy. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say also with Adoree being back, it allows the secondary to play their natural role. You don't have guys out of position, stretched out. You don't have Fabian Moreau all over the field. So I think that's a critical part, man. I think that's, and just like Steve said, this is a different team, top to bottom. Daniel Jones, a different quarterback than they played the first time around, and the defense is definitely different. So I'm pumped.
Tommy, who were our two starting cornerbacks up until 3 weeks ago? You remember?
Yeah, Fabian Moreau and you had McLeod, right?
Nick McLeod. Now that's your depth, right?
Right.
Now that's your depth. And that's good depth.
Yeah.
And I'm happy with that depth right now.
That's experience depth. So let's touch on the Philadelphia defense now. So there's a yin and a yang with this defense, in my opinion. So Philadelphia will come out in a 3-4. Philadelphia will come out in a 4-3. And Philadelphia will also come out where they will have, hold on a second, I've got it here. Where you're also going to see is they're going to be working with 2 defensive ends and nose tackle and 4 linebackers. So they throw you different looks. However, one thing I noticed here, rushing. Opponent yards per rush, they were number 24 in the league. Okay? They can be run on. Opponent rushing touchdowns per game, they were 16. All right?
I got a good one too.
Hang on a second. I got it. But, okay, opponent passing yards per game, they were first. They've got an excellent secondary. That secondary is extremely good. So I don't know if we could sit here and expect 300 yards out of Daniel Jones against this secondary. But what is this all saying? That Saquon Barkley can be a huge weapon against this defense Saturday night. And again, here's something we haven't touched on with our offensive line. But boy, how good is that left guard rotation working with Nick Gates and Brett Bredesen?
Absolutely.
You know what? You keep fresh bodies, 2 different types of players. Gates is a mauler. Bredesen's more technique, but boy, it works. It really works. Evan Neal, okay, I think Evan Neal is going to be a good lineman in time. This is still his rookie season. You see some improvement. You see some mistakes. you know what? As long as he doesn't make critical mistakes at bad times or take bad penalties, he's serviceable. Um, but you know what that we've seen against this Eagle defense? They can be scored. As good as that secondary is, they can be scored upon. We need a big game from the running backs. Now, does that mean Daniel Jones has to throw, dink and dunk to maybe soften that defense up? Okay, so be it. I'm sure Kafka and Dable are going to have something ready for them. I don't see this offense coming out and just, throwing up a goose egg here and doing nothing. I don't expect a lot of deep passes. Maybe they take their shots just to kind of keep them on their toes and soften them up. But that secondary is very, very good for the Eagles. Steve, what do you got?
So when we did that podcast with that Philadelphia guy, he talked about, you asked him at the time, what's the one thing that worries you about your defense? And he talked about their soft middle.
Yeah.
The second level of the defense you can throw on them. So I just have four things. Then Tommy, I want to hand it off to you. I think the Giants are going to take advantage of that Philadelphia soft middle. So the very short intermediate passes, that segues to Bellinger. I think Bellinger is going to be as big of a factor in this game as he's been all season. I love him. I love he's a true wide tight end because yes, Carl, we're still worried about Evan Neal, especially against their rush ends, but that's what you got Bellinger for. He'll chip, he'll block. He's made some mistakes this year, but he's also grown and become an excellent blocking tight end out of college. We knew that he had that skill. And he catches the passes for the most part. He's had a mistake here or there, but again, that's rookie-itis. We saw another touchdown last week. So I think he's going to be valuable as okay, if they are trying to cover Saquon, to your point, because Saquon is going to be valuable out in the flat, but even then they cover Saquon. I think that's where you're going to get Bellinger, given a quick block, a quick chip, help out Evan Neal, go out, do a 5-yard, and be Daniel's extra release valve, if you will. We always know tight ends are a quarterback's best friend, right? So I think Bellinger potentially can be huge in this game. Third, quick releases, move the pocket. I think we've seen so much of that over the last couple weeks, more and more as the weeks gone by. We saw it against Indy. Now we've seen it against Minnesota. I think we're going to continue to see that evolution of Daniel moving around in the pocket, staying strong, which we always wanted him to finally do, but also knowing when to move out of the pocket. Design plays to move the pocket, get away from that rush. So I think there are things that they can do to take some of that pressure off Daniel from that pass rush. And I think moving the pocket, I think the runs are going to be available for Daniel. Philadelphia, I think that's the one thing he can do is pick and choose his spots. And then lastly, ball control. We saw it in the Super Bowl in 1991, the old Bill Parcells philosophy. We've seen it over and over and over again. What do you do to slow down a high-powered offense? Keep the ball away from them, right? They did it against Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. Oh, Tom Brady, all-time great. Randy Moss, well, don't give him the ball. Don't let him score. It's the toughest thing to do. Guess what? The Giants have been doing it this year in ways that we haven't seen them do in decades. Some of the longest drives they've had in team history. So it's not easy. It takes execution. It takes not turning the ball over. But they seem to be doing it. And guess what? They're going to, if you expect to go on the road and beat a Philadelphia, you're going to have to play a great game, a mistake-free game. And I think controlling the ball, it's doable. And Carl, you said dink and dunk. You know what? That might be what they have to do a little bit. We might have to see a catch like Isaiah Hodgins had last week, where it was like tiptoe on the boundary. You need plays like that. So Tommy, please, I've said enough. What do you think? What do you think we're going to see?
Yeah, so you guys know I do my own show, so I do a deep opponent prep. And first of all, let me say this: the national media is saying the Week 18 game didn't matter. Philly played their backups, didn't matter. Don't let them tell you that. That game mattered because Philly wanted their starters out of that game at halftime. And as that game grew longer and longer, you've seen they got more and more frustrated. If this Giants team could strike early, keep this game close into the fourth quarter, you're going to start to see that same panic setting in. Just wanted to put that out there. As far as the Giants on offense, the Eagles, listen to this, they allow 6.5 yards per carry on the season to rushing quarterbacks. That's 31st in the NFL. Jones, when I went back and looked at the Week 14 game, for whatever reason, didn't look like himself moving. Looked like he still had the ankle injury from the Bears game. That's just me saying that. I don't know that for a fact. That's just what it felt like. He didn't carry the ball a lot that game. I expect him to have a much bigger role on the ground. This team could not stop rushing quarterbacks. When they played the Bears, it was a disaster. Justin Fields ran all over them.
Right.
Rough shot all over them.
Right.
So offensively, I think you're going to see more of Jones running the ball. I would like them to be safe when they run the ball with Jones. I hate the QB power play, that design QB play where he just takes it, he rolls on the right side, and he has to take a defender on head up. Hate that play. I don't want to see that, but I do think we see a lot more because it's a tough play. You're saying, okay, run the ball off the edge, and you're going to take a defender on one-on-one. He's a quarterback, but I think you see a lot more of that. As far as the Eagles' defense, listen, their bread and butter is the defensive line. 70 sacks this season. They have a 33% pressure rate, second in the NFL. They have 4 guys, first time in NFL history, 4 guys on that line with double-digit sacks. And you got Evan Neal, and not to knock Evan Neal, he was rated during the season at a 72 tackles, 71. But I'm happy he's a rookie learning on the job anyways. I'm not too upset about that. I think he'll be fine. Again, the recap, run the ball with Jones as well as Barkley. I don't think this is a game where you throw the ball 30 times. You have Bradbury, you have Slay, 2 top-rated cornerbacks. I don't think you want to throw the ball up. Shout out to our receiving corps. They've done a great job. Minnesota's pass defense is not Minnesota's pass defense. You have to handle that differently. And that's why I think you see Jones running. I think you see Barkley running. They're mediocre run D Philly, 4.4 yards per carry given up overall. Not good, not terrible. I just think you see a different game plan. Jones and Barkley, 54 yards combined rushing that Week 14 game. If that happens Saturday night, Giants are not going to win that football game. I'll tell you that right now. You got to be looking at least over 100 yards rushing, probably close to 150 combined between Jones and Barkley. I think if the Giants could do that, hit a few passes here and there, like Steve said, time of possession, keep that offense off the field as much as possible. Keep Hurts' shoulder nice and rusty on the sidelines. I think that's a recipe for success, fellas.
Tommy, let me ask you a question. Can you see the Eagles have someone shadowing Daniel Jones Saturday night?
That's a good question. And, it's funny. Daniel Jones has always been a good runner in his career. He's never been a runner like this, fellas. He had 6 rushing first downs in a playoff game last week. So that's possible. You might see somebody out there, they might say, this is your guy. You don't leave number 8.
Yeah.
Wherever he goes, you go. And if that's the case, I'm confident in Kafka and Daboll to say, okay, look what they're doing. Let's go back and do this. Let's do some read option. Let's catch that guy off the edge. Let's do some play action. But I could see that. The guy, listen, let's be honest. Jones wrecked that game for the Vikings rushing the football. And when he had to throw, he was just as good. But his running opened up that game in the second quarter.
Steve, what do you think?
No, I don't think they will. But let me reverse it back to you. Do you see the Giants doing that with Jalen Hurts?
That's a good question.
Why'd you have to do that to me, Steve?
Yeah, man. Put us on this.
Not initially. If he's hurting him, I could see maybe putting Landon Collins on him as a shadow.
Yeah.
Okay. Initially, I think they're gonna roll the dice and take their chances with it and see how if they can contain him or if they can control him enough where he's not hurting them to a degree. If you understand, if that makes any sense. So I think what I'm trying to say is I think the flow of the game is going to dictate if they do that. I don't see that being part of the game plan coming out of the locker room to start the game.
You know what's crazy about this game is I can't remember the last time our Giants were in the second round of a playoffs and we went in going, this is who we are. This is who they are. They run the ball. They got these 2 running backs. We got Eli, Phil Simms, Jeff Hostler, whatever year it was, Harry Collins in 2000. Like this is your team. This is your best players. And this is, man, if they win, it's because Plaxico did this and I don't know. I think there's a lot of ways that they could potentially win this game. I think there's a lot of ways they could potentially play defense. especially defense. Especially defense. Like, what is Wink going to do?
But doesn't it?
He's had the Midas touch.
But that kind of works in our favor if we're asking it. I'm sure the Eagles coaches are asking it too, right?
I think I think that is the hidden advantage that we have is that no matter how great of a year Philly had, they hit a rough patch. Hurts is not 100%. They've been off for a week. I think their offense could be rusty. Their defense has had a chance to rest, true. But I don't think that they know in their locker room. Here's exactly, Tommy, I'm going to hand it back to you. I think it's an advantage that their coaches, and Sirianni's brilliant. I don't think their coaches can say, here's exactly what we think the Giants are going to do. And I think that's an advantage. We're not the same team that they faced, that anybody's faced. We've evolved. The team, we just talked about our defense and the defense players, and we've now seen literally with our own eyes the last 3 weeks, this offense take no longer Saquon, Daniel's the focal point, but now we've seen Saquon become special again when he does. I don't think that they can say this is what we're going to see from the Giants, and I think that's a distinct advantage.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. I personally think this is one of the better coached Giants teams I've ever seen. Even going back to the Tom Coughlin coach teams, those teams were more talented, and we're yet to see where this team goes this season in the postseason. But I mean, I got to say, fellas, I seen about 5-6 plays last week on offense. I didn't see the entire year. I don't know where they pulled those plays out of. He must have came with a whole separate shopping bag to Minnesota. And I was like, holy cow, the Statue of Liberty play. I was like, wow. And that just goes to show you this coaching staff is very organic with their game plans. They're going to switch it up. It's going to be strictly opponent based. I think that's why this Giants team is scary, because this is not some juggernaut talented roster with some stiff coaches on the sidelines, copying the same game plan every week with little tweaks. That was a completely different game plan that you've seen in the wild card game than in week 16 against Minnesota. Completely different game plan, aside from passing the ball for the majority of the game. So I agree. If I'm Philly, I'm scared, man. The Giants are a team playing with house money. They're well coached, getting healthy at the right time. You have a quarterback that's ascending. You have a superstar running back, and you have an opportunistic defense.
What game was it, guys? Was it Carolina? I've never in my life, since 1983 or whatever the hell, I know the answer is no. You guys haven't seen. Do you remember that play where Wink had 3 guys stacked in the middle?
Yeah, like amoeba defense, right? They were both stacked.
Yeah. There was like 3 guys in the middle, and you're looking at it and you go, what the hell is that? And you're like, what? I'm glad I'm not on that team's offense. Was that against Carolina?
I believe it was.
I think they had Dexter actually stand up. Well, I remember what it was. It was like behind Dexter, there were 2 guys. They literally stood up, and the offense was like, "What the hell is this?"
Tommy, to your point, the top 4 Eagles players with sacks totaled 49 sacks.
Ooh,
that is scary, and that's 1 linebacker, 1 defensive tackle, and 2 defensive ends.
That's no joke.
That's serious pressure. To your point.
What's funny though? You remember the Eagles teams of the 80s that we hated going against with Clyde Simmons and Reggie White and Jerome Brown and Mike Golick. The difference between that team and this team is that team was amazing at sacking and rushing the quarterback, but you also couldn't run on that team. Yeah. Seth Joyner, makes you realize how great some of those teams were back in the 80s.
Clyde Simmons, remember?
Rest in peace, Jerome Brown.
Yeah. Oh, please.
The minister of defense. And
So
Reggie White, rest in peace.
So let's finish it off this way. Since Tommy, you're the leader of the clubhouse here. Prediction for Saturday night, Tommy. Let's go.
It's funny. You guys had me under the pressure that day when we did the predictions. I didn't even know I was at a 10 of wins until Steve's like, "Hey, before you do this next one, let's just recap where you're at to make sure."
Aren't you glad I did?
I am glad. I made for some good theater. That was awesome.
Yeah, but you manned up and went with it. So I give you a lot of kudos for that, Tommy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I fully believed it when I said it. I'll be honest. Because think about it, going back to the blue-white scrimmage training camp, this team looked rough, man. I mean, this team looked. Well, there was some people like, can they win 3, 4 games? But anyways, I don't want to get off topic. I'm going Giants. I'm doing it. This is a team with house money. They don't know how good or bad they are. They just go out and do what the coaches tell them. There's no pressure on this team. They play loose. Offense is ascending. Offense, you can make a case is the strength of this team right now. And if you would even go back 5 weeks, you'd be like, this offense is brutal. It's Saquon Barkley, and that's it, right? So they're ascending. They're developing. I think Philly's going to be a little bit tight, especially if the Giants could strike early like they did versus Minnesota. I think you're going to see that team get tight. All the pressure is on that Philly team. Number 1 seed, best team in the NFL. Hurts was, up for MVP before his late season slide. I think the Giants take this one. I think the Giants score 28. Eagles score 24. Close game. Of course, it's going to be a 1-possession game. That's all the Giants play. But I think in the end of the day, Jones pulls it out and the Giants move on.
Steve?
Do you remember my prediction last week, Carl? It was a weird number I gave. You remember? I believe it was 29. I knew it was 29 because I remember I said, "Oh, they're going to score a safety."
Didn't you say
That's
like
a strange
21,
score.
26 or something like that?
I said I believe I said 29 to 24.
Okay.
I think that's why. I remember I said 29 points for the Giants because I said, and they're going to score a safety, which of course they didn't. But it was 31 to 24. I was close.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I see 31 to 28 Giants.
30 again? Okay, I like that.
Yeah, I do. I do. I think there's going to be a lot of scoring late in this game. I think it's going to be similar. I think it's good. You're right. I think it's going to be close. I think the Giants could very easily be losing at the half. I don't want them to, but I think this team is so resilient and has so much stick-to-itiveness, and is, as I said in the beginning of the show, is a mirror of their head coach, personality-wise. Cool, calm, collected, and prepared, and tough. And I think they're going to grind and grind. And I think you're going to see some explosive plays, but they're not going to. It's like Daniel Jones had, in years past with a long run, or you're going to see Saquon bust one out. Yeah, 31 to 28 Giants.
I like that. That's a good one.
23-20 Giants.
Ooh.
I'll take it.
Again, I think this is going to be a dogfight, just a bloody brawl. I think these two teams hate each other, and with what's at stake, and Steve, this team, they don't get too high, they don't get too low. We have now seen the Giants, our Giants from this year, be able to come from behind. I would not at all be surprised to see the Eagles jump out to like a 10-0 lead, 13-0 lead. And the Giants just hang and chip away and chip away. I'm not expecting a lot of points. I think the Philadelphia, Tommy, you said it. The Minnesota defense is not the Philadelphia defense.
Absolutely.
This is a better defense. There were more holes on that Philadelphia defense than what they're on the Minnesota defense than what they're on this Philadelphia defense. I think this Philadelphia defense is just more aggressive. I think they're better coached. So I expect this to just be I don't expect a lot of scoring. I don't expect a lot of big plays. I think it's just going to be a grind, but the Giants are going to chip away and they're going to hang with them. I see the Giants maybe getting an early or mid to fourth quarter go-ahead touchdown or score, and then the defense holds on again and carries it and takes it home. So 23-20 Giants.
Let me put one little extra on my score prediction. I'm not changing it. I think the MVP might end up being Graham Gano. I could see I'm not saying the Giants are going to score a lot of touchdowns. I see us 31-28, but I see a lot of field goals. And that's okay as long as we win.
Yeah. Yeah,
I think
I'm happy with that.
I think we've had a few games where it's like, oh, thank God for Graham Gano. But then other than that, he's just been Mr. Consistent, and it's great. And he's we've been fortunate. We've been scoring it. I think this is a game where he might end up being the MVP. Like, Wow. Thank God. Once again, thank goodness we have Graham Gano. And I think that might be the difference.
Can I cut in here? That's very interesting that you say that. I had put up a post on Twitter the other day. It was the last time the Giants won in Philly. You know how the Giants won that game?
No.
5 field goals, 15 points.
Yeah, guys,
That's
5 field goals.
we won our
That's the
share of
playoffs.
playoff
That's
games.
interesting you say that.
Yeah, we won our share of playoff games by scoring the majority of our points on field goals. So, and no one complained about it then, and I'm certainly not going to complain about it if that's what happened Saturday night. So,
Lawrence Tynes.
thank you. So, whatever it takes. But again, that's a low scoring, just close game. That's what I see. So, guys,
Great.
yeah, I'm chomping at the bit. I'm ready for them to take the field tomorrow. So,
Tommy, can you imagine the first? I'm sorry, Carl. I was just going to say one last thing. Tommy, you remember the first time you were on our show? Carl, can you believe where we are right now?
It's great stuff, isn't it?
It's funny you say that too. I was actually thinking about that when Carl sent me the email invite. I was like, you know what? We were just doing the Mark Your Calendar show. We were talking about free agency, draft picks. No talk about postseason, or everything was about 2023. Well, guess what? It's about early 2023 because here we go. We're right in the mix of things.
And Steve, think about it. When we started, it was the off season coming off a 4-win, right? A 4-win season, and we were sitting here saying, "Are we out of our minds starting this show at this point?" And here we are doing a podcast of a team that is in the divisional round of the playoffs. So, and getting great support from a lot of our fans and followers as well. And
Can I say something real quick?
Thank
Sorry
you.
to cut
Go
you
ahead,
off.
Tom. Go right ahead,
I just
Tommy.
want to shout you two out before we end the show. I mean, you guys are amazing. So respectful, classy, professional, amazing to work with. And I've been around now for about a year. I'm not shy to say it. Carl gave me my start. If it wasn't for Carl, I probably would not be doing this. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Me and him became friends. We were in a group chat with another gentleman, and I remember Carl telling me one day, "Don't worry, I'm going to get something going. We're going to get something going. I'm going to have you on." And I'm like, "Okay, all right, yeah, that sounds great." At this point, I've never done a podcast, never done any. Only thing I did was tweet, and really, you gave me that positive energy. You put the battery in my back. Steve, you're amazing. I always love coming on this show. The consummate pros. If anybody out there is not subscribed, stop now. Hit the subscribe button. These guys know Giants football probably better than anyone out there, and they do it the right way. Sorry, I had to get that.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Tommy.
you, Tommy.
That's very
We love
nice
you,
of
man.
you to say and much appreciated.
I mean it.
Well, again, we enjoy having you on. We enjoy collaborating together with you, and we look forward to doing it much more in the future. And again, you've come a long way yourself. You were nervous at first, and you were unsure of yourself, and you've created a nice little niche for yourself as well. So it's been very gratifying to watch you succeed as well. So we wish you continued success with what you're doing as well. And again, we're looking forward to much collaboration together going forward.
Absolutely. Appreciate that.
Guys, this was great as always. Let's go Giants. Steve.
Go Giants, baby.
Man, I'm ready. I can't wait. I'm already fired up for this. So guys, again, thank you for your support. Thank you for following us, and we will see you next week, episode 47. This episode will be available tomorrow morning. Everybody, good night. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Go Giants.